This is Bookmarks with Richard Gadds.
Hello, this is Richard Gadds. I'm sitting in my kitchen again in Keynsham, and today I'm joined by Brian Price, a crime writer who also advises other crime writers on getting the science right in their books. Is that right?
Absolutely, yes. I'm a scientist by trade, a chemist and a biologist, and I thought I'd like to give something back to the crime writing community because I've enjoyed reading crime since I was a nipper, really. And I did notice in a lot of books, and in particular on television, very silly errors involving science, like, you can't knock somebody out with chloroform and keep them unconscious for half an hour.
Yeah.
It takes 5 minutes to send somebody under, and then they wake up when you stop giving them the chloroform.
Yeah.
You can't silence a pistol so it just goes pop like that, with one or two very rare exceptions. Yeah. If you shoot someone with a shotgun, they're not going to be blown back through a window or a door because you'd be blown in the opposite direction. It's basic physics. Yeah. So I thought I'd first of all start a website, putting some of these tips on there, and then my wife said turn it into a book, which I did, and it's been very well received. So now I do advise authors on quite a number of scientific topics, and I was recently credited with keeping an author out of jail. It was N.W. Craven, Mike Craven, who wrote a brilliant book called The Botanist, in which he poisoned people, and he wanted to put the recipe for ricin in the book.
Oh, right.
Now that's a seriously bad idea, not just because people might copy it, but because it's an offence under anti-terrorism legislation. Oh. So although I didn't really see the constabulary kicking down his door at 6 o'clock in the morning, I said, this is probably not a good idea, Mike. Yeah. And he actually credited me with keeping him out of jail when he received an award for the book, and also in a couple of newspaper interviews. But I don't just deal with poisons, I can deal with fires and firearms, explosives, what have you. So it's quite fun, it's interesting topics to research.
Yes, it's fascinating. What are the common errors that crime writers commit?
Well, there's the three I've mentioned. Then there's cyanide. You always get the bit of a cliche, I can smell almonds in his breath. Yeah. That must mean he's cyanide. Well, a couple of things there. Firstly, only half the population or so can smell the cyanide. It's a genetic thing. And the other thing is if someone's been breathing out cyanide, it's probably not a very good idea to take a hearty whiff of it in case it affects you as well. Yeah. So there's that. There's on television and films in particular, if you drop a lighted cigarette into a pool of petrol, it'll go out. You need a decent flame. I'm not suggesting you should fill up your car while smoking, but certainly if you want to get a blaze going, you need to chuck in a lighter or a soaking rag or something that's already burning. Diesel is almost impossible to ignite, but you do see people doing that. With explosions, you see sort of a big bang going off 10 feet from somebody and they're just sort of a bit dusty. Well, no, they'd be pulverised, they'd be permanently deaf probably. Yeah. So there's all these kind of things which people perhaps take for granted. Now I know in Hollywood, of course, they liked having spectacular, so every time a car crashes it bursts into flame, even if it's running on diesel, which it doesn't happen all that often. It can do, but it's not an inevitable thing. So there's lots of stuff they do for flash and so on, but if you're writing a book and if you're trying to get some kind of credibility, then it's worth avoiding some of these errors. Yeah. Stephen King talked about a horde of picky-ass readers whose life's work is to show you where you've messed up. I'm paraphrasing slightly. Yeah. Many authors go to great lengths to get things right, and I just try and help them.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I know. I read fairly recently about the difficulty of knocking somebody out. Yeah. Like with a single blow, which you see very often.
Well, I think going back to James Bond and the Avengers, isn't it? The karate chop on the side of the neck. Well, it can work, but it's only briefly. Yeah. If you hit somebody over the head, yes, they can be knocked out and dazed for a while. Yeah. But you get the situation in a TV series where every episode someone's banged over the head and knocked unconscious. Well, at the end of the series, they'd be completely wrecked. And if you think about boxers getting punch drunk and brain damage, over their careers. Well, in the TV series, I think they probably get it far worse in terms of unconsciousness, so their brain would be mush by then.
Yeah. Do you find there's resistance to good advice like that?
I don't think there's resistance. If somebody sends me an email and says, "Can I get this right?" Someone was asking me about a post-mortem the other day.
Yeah.
They're usually happy to take the advice, but occasionally you have to stretch things for a plot. I mean, I'm a fiction writer myself, and one of the things which you have to do, otherwise the book will be really long and boring, is speed up the results of things like post-mortems and toxicology tests. If somebody's been poisoned with something fairly common, like, I don't know, heroin or something, they do have fairly quick screening tests. If it's something unusual like aconite or strychnine, it can take weeks for the toxicology to come back, even if somebody thinks to look for the poison in the first place.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because I wrote a non-fiction for kids some years ago about crime and everything, and I spoke to a couple of policemen, and there was sort of half a dozen things that they said to me, you must put in these common mistakes, because it annoys the hell out of us.
Oh, yes.
Things like putting guards on the door during interrogations.
Oh, yes.
It never happens. I don't know why they do that.
I know.
And putting the sirens on the way to arrest someone.
Yes.
And they said, why? Because quite often I've sort of stood up in front of audiences of kids in the past, and I've said, oh, this is a mistake, apparently, that lots of things. Can anybody work out why? And all these 8-year-olds, all the hands go up. They go, well, yeah, because I'll tell them they're coming. And I was like, well, see, you 8-year-olds are more intelligent than the people putting these TV series in.
And if you look at something like Line of Duty, which is a brilliant drama, I mean, it's tremendously plotted and acted and so on, but they do make so many silly mistakes. It's nothing to do with
really. I thought that would stick absolutely to the book.
No, if you look at there was one conclusion to one episode where you were talking about guards outside an interrogation. They were interrogating police officers. They weren't even armed criminals, and they had people with automatic weapons standing outside the interrogation room, and then they started firing to let the villain escape. No, absolutely not. And in another episode, you had the superintendent pull out a pistol. Now, I mean, superintendents aren't armed. That's the first thing. And there was this chap with a gun stuck up against someone's neck as a hostage behind a big plate glass door. So our hero pulls out his Glock and fires through the door and manages to hit the hostage hit the villain without hitting the hostage. And of course, once you fire into a piece of glass, first you're not really sure where the bullet's going to go. Then the people behind it are going to be covered in glass, and the chances are that it would hit the hostage because they were in the front anyway. So that was really a bit silly, but it's excellent drama and very entertaining. But I think most police officers probably don't like watching it.
I think that's the difficulty with the police procedural these days. It's the fact that the demands of fiction kind of get in the way of the science and the facts.
I think that's true, but there are a number of people who ex-officers who advise, and I work occasionally with a chap called Graham Bartlett, who's a brilliant writer in his own right. He was the former chief superintendent in Brighton and Hove, and he's a friend of Peter James, the famous novelist.
Oh yes, I've met him.
He advises other writers on police procedure, and you can have him go through a whole manuscript. It's part of his sort of retirement business, and I help out with the chemical and science stuff. He says, well, look, you've got to make it seem credible. Avoid the really big mistakes.
Yeah.
But if you put in every bit of procedural detail that the police do, it would be a very boring book. You're writing entertainment, not a policing manual.
It's funny. It's interesting you say that, because last week I was talking to the writer Tom Carlyle, and we were kind of speculating on the idea that things like the police procedural and contemporary crime fiction is going to get harder and harder to write, because the science is kind of overtaking it. You've almost got to, because you see so many crime so much crime fiction today set in the past because it avoids a lot of these shortcuts, as it were, that the police now have.
Yes.
You know, it's almost like, give it 20, 30 years and it'll be extremely hard not to quite readily detect who committed a crime, because you've got CCTV and DNA and, you leave traces of yourself wherever you go.
That's right, and there's a famous principle of Locard, 19th century, end of the 19th century scientist, who basically said, in French, every contact leaves a trace.
Yeah.
So if you go into a crime scene, you'll leave something and you'll take something with you. And the science of DNA and that is phenomenal these days, and you can almost get too much information because if you go into a room within 30 seconds, a minute, your DNA is in that room. You'll shed a hair or a skin flake or something. Yeah. And if someone finds that, you could have left the room hours before a crime was committed, but they still might think you're in the frame. Yeah. There was a famous pathologist, Dr. Angela Gallup, a forensic scientist rather, and she, commenting on the fact that science is so powerful these days, did say that if people get away with crimes, it won't be through lack of science, it'll be through lack of resources. Because the funding isn't there to pay for the forensic tests, to pay for the police officers doing their normal job. And the other point which you referred to, of course, is things like CCTV, with mobile phones, with CCTV, with automatic number plate recognition on major roads. All these things can track vehicles, and if you find a vehicle, you can interrogate its electronics and find out where it's been and when, so you can actually prove that somebody was at a suspicious address or a crime scene because it's in their car knows about it, and you can find out about it. So actually keeping track of somebody is relatively easy if you've got a certain amount of information. A picture I saw on the internet long ago of a place was where George Orwell was born, and there was a blue plaque for George Orwell, and the wall was covered in CCTV cameras.
Oh, there's irony.
Yes, absolutely.
So you write fiction as well. What brought you to that?
I suppose it was, initially I wrote a short story which was quite fun, involving poisonous mushrooms. But I joined up to this website or Facebook group called Crime Fiction Coach, and they held a competition for the best opening line of a novel. And my entry won. And it was the small grey-haired woman grimaced as she pulled a shopping trolley into the police station containing her husband's head.
That's a good one.
And that won, and I won a bar of chocolate and a 3 a.m. notebook, which is where you wake up in the middle of the night, you write down your plot details before you forget.
Yeah, I've got a big post-it pad next to one and a pencil. And
somebody said in the feedback that she couldn't wait to read the rest of the book. Well, I had no choice. I had to write it at that point.
So where did the head come from? I want to know now.
Well, yes, it was a message from some villains who her husband had been involved with. And that became the book Fatal Trade. I did the usual thing. I wrote the thing, I got it critiqued, and then I sent it round a whole series of agents and publishers to see if anyone wanted to publish it. I had thought about self-publishing, but I didn't think I really had the skills for that. And eventually somebody asked for the full manuscript, and nothing happened for a bit. And then I got an email saying, look, I'm sorry, we've not been able to finish reading it. We're homeschooling our kids during lockdown, because this was back during the pandemic. And then after that Christmas, I got an email saying, are you still interested? Because we'd like to publish it. And that was Hobeck Books, a lovely firm, a lovely couple of people. And I've had 4 books published through them, and the latest is in the pipeline. So excellent. I finished the first drafts the night before last.
Yeah, so they're a small press.
They're a small independent press. They are very friendly. They don't have the resources to take out huge advertising campaigns, so most of the marketing and the publicity is done through social media. But obviously we try and get reviews by bloggers and so on. And they're a very friendly, dedicated company. They're not marketing product. they are selling books in which they believe and which they love. And that's a really comfortable place to be.
Yeah. I mean, that's, I'm very much a supporter of the independent sector. Partly because I'm published by the independent sector myself.
Yes.
Hello, DX's Press. But yeah, I think that's where a lot of the really great stuff in publishing is coming from these days. You know, the bigger publishers are, you know, producing the mass market stuff, you know, the Richard Osmans and the J.K. Rowlings and everything else. And all the, you know, the innovative stuff, the new stuff, is coming from the smaller places.
I think that's true to quite a large extent. There is a lot of really good stuff in the independent sector, but there are some really good books which are published by the mainstream press because people have managed to get into them. They built up a reputation, and then the mainstream have taken over. But there are pros and cons. I mean, some of the stuff published by the big publishers are celebrity things, which are sometimes ghostwritten. I'm not including Richard Osman here because he's a brilliant writer and I really like his Thursday Murder Club books. But there are other people who, because they've been on an entertainment show or something else, decide to write a novel. They might have a decent idea, but you know, they get this huge publicity budget behind them. It fills up the shelves in Waterstones or wherever. Which means that there isn't the space for them to include some of the smaller presses and the independent ones, which can be quite demoralising. But yes, you're right, there's a lot of really good stuff published by small publishers and indeed self-published authors. There are some people who are really good at doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing with self-publishing is you've got to be a certain sort of person. You've got to be very keen on promotion. Because I know a lot of people have said to me, is self-publishing a good idea? And I say, it is a good idea, it's great, if you're prepared to put in at least as many hours publicising as you are writing.
Yeah.
And if you're a quick writer and you can turn over whole books in 2 or 3 months. Because the people that tend to be very successful at self-publishing tend to fit that kind of pattern. They publish very regularly and they're very, very good at promotion.
That's absolutely true. And there's one author whose career was built up through self-publishing and writes good books, but her background was in marketing. So she knows how to get into the right channels and how to frame stuff that will be picked up. And she's done very, very well. There's another chap, I think, who's a member of our group, who's got a whole lot of really good books behind him, self-published, and doing pretty well as far as we can see.
Yeah, good. Do you have a particular detective who runs through all of your books?
Yeah, it's a detective constable, Mel Cotton. She's the daughter of 2 former police officers. Her mother was killed in the line of duty. Her dad was retired as a senior officer detective. So she's to some extent got a kind of family tradition to live up to. So she is a bit impetuous, especially in the first book. The first one was called Fatal Trade, by the way, where I introduce her and the other members of the team, because obviously she's in the limelight a lot, but there are other officers involved. You don't get a single detective solving a case. Yeah,
that was another thing the police would said to me, for goodness sake, you don't get DCIs turning up at crime scenes doing this, that and the other.
Or don't get superintendents interviewing people. Yeah. That's all done by specially trained constables or sergeants at the most. And anybody from DCI upwards is basically an administrator. They may turn up to certain situations like an armed siege, but most of the time they're grappling with budgets and staffing and strategy. I mean, obviously the senior investigating officer in a murder would be a DCI, sometimes a DI, sometimes higher. So they've got all the organisation of the inquiry to deal with. But on a murder you'd have 20 or 30 people involved, civilian support, detectives, some uniformed people as well. And that's how it works. But if you're writing a book like that, and Graham was told about this, Graham Bartlett, when his first book was submitted, his agent said, well, look, you've got 20 or 30 people here, get rid of them. Because the reader isn't going to remember all these people and what they do. Yeah. So you have to narrow it down. Yeah. So it's a little bit of a sort of a fiddle there. But the other thing, which I try to avoid this a bit in my books, is that you don't have a police station dealing with one crime at a time. You'll have a whole load going. I did a charity event with a detective inspector from Bristol, and she was saying, I think the figure was she's got 15 murders going at any one time.
Wow.
Investigations. Not 15 murders a day, obviously.
Well, it's
so there's all this strategy and resources and an awful lot happening, and you don't solve it in an hour and a half and all that kind of thing. So in my book, I do have them involved with not just the main murder, but other things going on at the same time.
Right.
And that was one of the things I liked about the Frost TV programs and books.
Yeah.
There were a lot more TV programs than books. He wasn't just dealing with one inquiry. There were lots of other stuff coming in. There's housebreaking, there's shoplifting, there's a murder, and there's this, that, and the other. And sometimes they knitted together and were all part of a larger picture. Sometimes they're independent. But police officers are rarely focused on just one thing.
No.
A high-profile murder inquiry, like Millie Dowler or something, yes, they probably would be dedicated. But within a particular group of officers, there's other things going on as well, and not just family life. I do try and avoid the cliche of the sort of middle-aged, overweight, alcoholic detective who everybody hates. So I've got younger officers and the DCs and the sergeant doing most of the work, but guided by more senior officers.
Yeah, I know. A publisher once said to me that the reason that sort of grizzled, middle-aged detective is so common is because the readers tend to be grizzled and middle-aged. I thought, well, I suppose, yes, I can see the point.
Given that quite a large proportion of crime readers are women, I don't think the grizzled woman would be very popular, but middle-aged, maybe. I don't know.
I think it divides along sort of genre lines, because the grittier type of thing, the more the police procedural type thing, tends to be a sort of boys' read, as it were, and the cosy crime tends to be
to some extent, but the thrillers, the sort of spy stuff, the individual in peril has to fight his way through loads of villains, and the police are only peripheral. They are more of a male read, and they're the ones where they might spend a page and a half talking about a particular rifle bullet or something, and they focus on technology and weapons and that kind of stuff. But police procedurals are very popular among female readers, definitely.
Right, yeah. I must admit, I'm slightly out of touch with the contemporary crime scene, I have to confess.
I think there are some authors who get very gory, and some people are put off by that. Others find it. I'm not sure how they find it. I mean, if you take someone like Stuart McBride, a Scottish writer who is really good, his descriptions of places and that are vivid and really evocative, set in Aberdeen or the Highlands. Some of his stuff is really strong, it's really grisly and grim, but the humour he includes in the book is a counterbalance to that, and leavens it, if you like. And that's how it is in the emergency services. You have a lot of gallows humour, which helps you cope with the grimness of the day. If you're a traffic officer picking bits of people off the Keynsham bypass or something, you have to develop a thick skin and some way of letting off steam, and that could be by some quite off-colour jokes.
Yeah. It's interesting what you say there about gore, because there's a lot of debate amongst horror fiction writers like me about the way that crime as a genre has kind of seeped through into areas of what traditionally would be called horror. The serial killer, and as you say, the more gory bits and pieces.
I think that's true. It's a sort of blurring of the boundaries, if there ever were, much in the way of boundaries. I don't like to pretend that violence is harmless. I mean, if you look at sort of TV programs in the 60s, nobody ever bled from a knife or a gunshot wound. Sharp implements can, inflict horrific injuries on people, and people maybe complained about Game of Thrones on TV being gory.
Yeah.
But if you hit somebody with a very heavy, sharp, large piece of steel, you're going to make a right mess of them.
Yeah.
And you can't pretend it's just a sort of quick poke in the ribs and then they're falling over.
Yeah.
You can overdo things. I mean, definitely there are things which I've seen which are quite unpleasant on television. The one Limehouse Golem didn't actually show it, but there's some fairly unpleasant stuff in that. But pretending that getting stabbed is nothing to worry about, it really hurts. And if someone is shot in the shoulder, I mean, this is another classic mistake. They're not going to turn up two days later in the office with their arm in a sling and a rueful grin. Yeah. There's an awful lot of plumbing and nerves and things in a shoulder. And unless it just sort of grazes the top of the bone, if it hits the stuff underneath, you're going to be off work for months, if indeed you can ever return, or indeed ever get the reuse of that arm. I think you can over-sanitize violence and have it looking more like a joke, which, I'm not talking about camp stuff like the Avengers and so on, I'm talking about where it's supposed to be a bit more realistic.
Yeah. Well, again, it would come back to the clash between fiction and reality.
Yeah. I think people do like to have some degree of credibility in things, but what they don't know, I suppose, is that quite often what they're shown isn't remotely credible.
Yeah, I mean, it does. It must be a dilemma, I suppose. On the one hand, it's wrong to give a false impression, as you say, but then on the other hand, drama can get a bit sort of anodyne.
Yeah. I mean, you use the word cosy, and it's a very popular genre, and it is sometimes a bit difficult to define, but certainly there's very little gory violence. They don't have details of post-mortems. They don't have knife fights and the consequent wounds or anything like that.
Yeah. This is what I mean. There seems to be a very stark difference between the cosy crime and the more
realistic ones.
The grittier stuff.
Yeah. But cozies are very popular, and they're very character driven usually. I think you might call Richard Osman stuff cosy. I don't know how happy you'd be pleased about that. But killing somebody is not actually a cosy activity.
Well, no.
But you park that death bit and then go on with the investigation and the tea shoppy and all that kind of thing.
I mean, Agatha Christie is constantly called cosy, and yet there's so much grimness.
Oh, the actual situations are, she was very good on many things. I mean, she was particularly good on poisons, in fact. Yeah,
because she was trained in that, wasn't she?
She was a dispensing assistant working in a pharmacy. Yeah, and one of her first novel involved the properties of a couple of drugs which she was aware of. I won't give the spoiler away in case anybody hasn't read it. It's The Mysterious Affair at Styles, and she knew about certain things you were or weren't supposed to do with two different medicines, and that resulted in someone's death in the plot, and then Christie went on there. I think obviously a lot of her stuff is dated, some of the languages and attitudes are dated. It's the same with many of these golden age things, but I do like some of the older writers, the people who are being republished by the British Library.
Yes, that's a really good series, isn't it?
Some very good ones,
because I think that's where she got the idea for Hercule Poirot, I think, when she was a sort of wartime, because of the Belgian refugees.
Poirot was a Belgian refugee, wasn't he? So I think she may have picked up on that.
And I always think it's interesting. Notice the difference between someone like Agatha Christie and someone like Arthur Conan Doyle, because Agatha Christie didn't like Hercule Poirot as a character, but kept writing him because her readers liked him.
Yes.
Whereas Conan Doyle didn't like Sherlock Holmes, so he killed him.
Yeah.
There's very different attitudes.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Conan Doyle's stuff is obviously groundbreaking. I think if you look at some of the plot lines, they're a little bit tenuous.
Yeah. Some of the later ones are quite creaky.
Yeah. But the contemporary of his, who I particularly like, is R. Austin Freeman. His hero is Dr. Thorndike, who's medically trained and also a lawyer. And there's an awful lot of early forensic science in there, which Doyle didn't include to such an extent. I mean, I know Holmes was supposed to be able to identify, 30 or 40 different types of tobacco ash, but that's probably pushing things a bit, so in those days. But there are other things which Thorndike works out by looking at scientific stuff, by analysis, by photography and various other things, and I really enjoy those. There's some of them are still available, been republished recently.
I don't know those, I must look those out.
Definitely.
Really good. Well, Brian, thank you so much for coming on to speak to us today.
It's a
pleasure.
It's
been absolutely fascinating. And next time I get somebody stabbed in one of my books,
Okay.
I shall approach it in a very different way.
Right, well, I think I do have someone stabbed quite badly in my first book, Fatal Trade.
Right.
But moving through the others, I got a bomb which a detective diffuses. Not quite as dramatic as Trigger Point, if you watch that on the television. I've got racist crimes, I've got a serial poisoner, and that book actually ends up in Weston-super-Mare, where I live.
Right.
A site I scoped out.
Tell us about your latest title. What should we look for in the shops?
The latest one is called Fatal Blow. It's a bit of a follow-on from Fatal Dose, which is the serial poisoner one, because along with the poisoner, as I say, the police have to deal with other things at the same time. We've got an Albanian gang doing all sorts of unspeakable things, and the police managed to take them down. Well, Fatal Blow starts with the beginning of a revenge campaign by the organised crime group, where they blow up the police station.
Wow.
Things then develop from there, campaign.
You're very good at beginnings, I can tell.
Yes, well, I think what was it, the beginning is that they'll open the barrier to the police station car park and let the sandwich van in, unaware he only had moments to live. And then it all goes up.
Well, I think you could write a book on first sentences. That's a chance one. Well, Brian Price, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us, and I hope to speak to you again soon.
Thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you.
That was Bookmarks with Richard Gadds. For more, visit www.richardgadds.co.uk.